So India, first time there, first impressions. I mean, for so many people coming to Africa for the first time and thinking that they're going to arrive to something, you must have been in a similar boat for the first time in a long time.
Absolutely, and I think visiting a place in Africa for the first time is a little different because you're still on the continent. It's a lion is a lion, a leopard's a leopard, and so you still have some form of knowledge of an animal or an animal's behavior, even the culture. But being on a different continent, going to look at something as iconic as a tiger, and India as a culture itself and as a country, I mean, it's massive. New Delhi, 22 million people, and just arriving in there. So you're on the, not on the back foot, but you definitely, you feel that sense of new, that sense of you kind of discovering. And I've never felt that on a safari as strong as I did in this India adventure.
And traffic, I mean, if Nairobi traffic, if that was, let's say Nairobi traffic is an 8 out of 10, where would traffic in India sit?
15, because it was intense. You know, we try to avoid the peak traffic as much as we could. By leaving very early in the mornings, so we spent, just to give it an idea of context, we spent the first night in Delhi, which is the fifth most populated city in the world. So it's pretty big, half of South Africa's population in one city. And what strikes you is the number of people, the cars, the bikes, the pollution. I mean, the morning that we left, the following morning, we couldn't see. Our flight was almost grounded at 9 o'clock in the morning due to just the air being polluted and smog, and so it's on another level. It's a very, very different experience.
I think,
but not bad.
No,
so,
I was going to say,
so this is the thing. It's not
you can't go to India and not experience traffic. It's the same like Nairobi.
Exactly, but it's not you expect it. You know all the facts, everything that you've heard about India and about the big cities and the people. So it's not like it was a bad experience. It was an adventure. It felt like you were living this series of segments or adventures that you've always dreamt of, and here you were seeing it for the first time. So it's all part of that experience. It really wasn't a negative thing at all.
And I think that's something that's part of all of our safaris, is that yes, they're about photography, but it's so much more than just photography. It's an experience.
Exactly.
So the rundown of your itinerary, you started in New Delhi, then how did you run from there? How many nights and where?
So to give you an idea, starting in Delhi is an important part of it because we plan a pretty full day the next day. So most of the guests arrived the night before, a couple of guests arrived 2 days before, and one guy arrived on the 22nd of December, like 2 weeks before the actual safari date. So, I mean, he just explored India, and it was awesome because he went to a lot of the great monuments and like the Taj Mahal, and he went mad. So, but it is important to arrive the day before. The next morning we took a flight out pretty early on, and that gives us a chance to get to the camp in time for lunch.
So you went from Delhi to
straight to Ranthambore on this occasion, which is the reserve home of the Tigers. We stayed at Sujan Sherbakh for the first 4 nights. We went into Jaipur on the next location. That was for 2 nights. Stayed at the Raj Mahal Palace, which is a palace built in, I think, 1726 or 1723.
I saw some pictures of that coming through, and I think someone actually made a comment that that's the last place that you would want to wake up with a hangover, just in terms of all the colors and patterns and textures, and it looks
smells
incredible.
Like, I mean, just the smells coming out of within the palace itself. It's fragrant, but a hangover would probably, not that I know what that feels like, but so, and then 2 nights there, which was great because guests got a little bit of downtime, got to explore the city. Jaipur itself is a rich with culture and some of the best markets in India. Great for bargaining. It's one of the best places for jewelry. Incredible. I mean, one of the guests had a piece made for her on the day. Went to the market in the afternoon at 3. They delivered at 8 o'clock. A beautiful piece that they made for her. So a lot of culture in there, and from there we took a drive. It's about a 6-hour drive to Jawai, where we spent time at Sujan Jawai.
Awesome. We're going to talk a little bit more about each of the camps and the areas, but that place just unbelievable. Tigers. How big are they?
They're pretty big, eh? We were fortunate. We didn't see small cubs, so we saw 8 individual tigers, which was pretty awesome. We saw six tigers on the first day alone, the first drive. So Ranthambore really blessed us. Of those, we saw 2 adult females. We saw sub-adult cubs. Sub-adult cubs which are bigger than a male lion in Africa.
Jeez.
Shall I add? And then on the last day, we actually saw their father. We saw the territorial male.
Yeah.
And
a beast, eh?
I mean, he's big. To see his tracks, just the tracks alone. I mean, the guys, I've got a thing for. I love tracking. I love seeing the tracks and studying tracks. And the guys, not really allowed to climb off your car. And I was like, buddy, there's no way I'm not climbing off this car and taking a photograph of that track, or at least putting my hand next to it. So I was out of the car and just studying the tracks. And it's big. These are big animals. Yeah.
And so a little bit on safari in India. It's quite different to South Africa. They've got zones which they manage,
Yes.
numbers of people going through.
Yeah.
The vehicles are different, the vehicle pressures and the conduct and the sightings and that
Yes.
sort of stuff. Just talk us a little bit about through that whole side of things.
So it's very interesting. Ranthambore itself it's the home of the tiger. It's the you want to see tigers anywhere in the world, but in India you go to Ranthambore.
Yeah.
There are other reserves to see them within, but they're very jungle-like. The tigers are pretty skittish. There's not a strong road network, so you can see them, but it's more challenging. The best chance is in Ranthambore, and that's for good reason. They really, really take care to look after the reserve and the tigers. There's only 62 tigers in that whole reserve. Okay, in a reserve that's I think 800 square kilometers. So it's a big reserve, and not a lot of tigers. There's 9 zones. Sorry.
No, yeah.
And so the reserve is divided up into these different zones because of vehicle pressure. And I thought it's going to be busy. Now, I've been in Kruger, I've been in a few places, and I've seen 10 times more traffic in, not so much tomorrow, but like Luangwa, South Luangwa, which is known for a place where it's remote, it's far to go to. If you go to the wrong place in South Luangwa, I had a leopard sighting with 23 cars, off-road, viewing a leopard. And you'd never expect that for Luangwa. And so when I went to Ranthambore, just hearing what people say, how busy it is, it wasn't that bad at all. I think we had 8 to 9 cars in one sighting being the most. And it's strictly forbidden to go off-road, and there's severe penalties. And the great thing is the guides actually abide by these. They've got a very strong guiding body. Our 2 guides, Farouk and Ash, they work for the park itself, but they are contracted to Sherbak, if that makes sense.
So you have a vehicle from the lodge with a driver or a local guide,
a lodge driver,
and then a
vehicle
authority.
And a park, yes, so he jumps up as well.
Okay.
But these 2 guys are exclusive to Sherbak.
Just to put it into context, so in Sherbak, it's Relais Chateau. This is top end.
Absolutely.
If you're going to do this once, this is the kind of place that you want to go to.
Best of the best, can't beat it.
Yeah.
And so how it works is these guys then join us. We go into the reserve. There's 3 time limits in a day that you can visit the reserve in. If you go in the morning or afternoon as an activity, you get 3.5 hours. So in, out, you have to be back out. They change the times according to sunrise and sunset, but basically 3.5 hours morning, 3.5 hours in the afternoon. If you do a half-day permit, you get a little bit more. So you can, for example, enter the park at 7, you come out at 12:30, and then a full-day permit. If you're on a half-day and a full-day permit, you're not bound to zones. Okay, and that's the benefit. That's what we do. So every day we have access to that.
Yeah, you can
go where you want. There's no limitation. But if you go in, and these are the things you don't know before you book your safari. You might go in, be bound to a morning activity, be in the park for 3.5 hours, and get allocated a zone, and that's where you go. Each zone, it's not that one zone was worse than the other. We had intense tiger activity in every zone that we went in. We didn't get to zone 6, 7, and 8. It was a little bit far, and there was a lot of activity in the other ones. But it's just a matter of distance. That was the main thing for us. If some of the zones are far away, and so you don't always get to those. But the cool thing is that we were on full and half-day permits, so it allowed us to explore quite a bit of the park, but we could go and view sightings as and when they happen. And the great thing about these zones and the limitations is that it divides up the traffic. So cars can't all go 20 or 30 cars to a tiger sighting. You have to be distributed, and that's very good. And they enforce it very well. So gate times, we were sharp. We didn't. There was not one day when we were late. When we had to be out, we were out at the exact time. And so there's a very big respect for these tigers.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't know before. And you kind of think it's a free for all,
circus, yeah.
but it's not. It really isn't.
I
It's
was
very
gonna
well
say,
managed.
It's quite refreshing to hear that, because the general perception, and it probably is like this in other areas, it's a bit, like when we talk about national parks versus private reserves and the vehicle traffic and stuff, that there is a process which is managing guest experiences, and Ranthambore is one of those areas that has really done it well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So from there, you guys got some great stuff. I know, Marlon, you're going to do your trip report shortly as well. There will be a link to that at the bottom of this. But from there, you guys went to Jaipur.
Yes. So distances, to give you an idea, it's about a 3-hour drive. That's the one thing to get used to in India. You can't really take a flight from anywhere to anywhere. It's a lot of it's by road. So they don't have that set infrastructure. And so we drove from Sherbak to Jaipur, 3 hour drive, a couple of near-death experiences, cows, people, bikes, trucks, a lot of hooting. It's interesting on the roads, but we made it to...
Earphones on and just...
Man, I guess we're pretty tired, so it was a very full day. So most of the guys in the back were knocked out, and I was just keeping the driver entertained. He was rather entertaining. There'll be a photo of him if you have a look at the...
He was the guy with the proper moustache game going.
That's him. So he was entertaining. So it was a good drive. And the great thing about driving between these places is you get a sense of the country, and I always enjoy that. I think so often in safari places you fly into Johannesburg, get on your plane, fly to the sands, fly back.
You've got no idea of context.
You know the airport, you know the lodge, and that's it. And I think that's what I wanted to avoid here, is to get a grip of the country, the people, and that's exactly what we could see. And then on to Jaipur, yeah.
And so the palace itself was just completely over the top.
I was uncomfortable there. From South Africa, I've experienced good safari camps, the best of the best, but this was, it was a freaking palace.
But a royal palace that
literally
was built.
It's still owned by the royal family of Rajasthan, okay? So it's still a palace. No, you can't just go there. It's the whole grounds, they're the hosting grounds, it's
massive.
Manicured lawns, it's everything you can think of. And in fact, when I got there in the afternoon, I went and asked the front desk if they had a gym. And they said, sure they do. And I asked if they could point me in the direction. I just want to go and just have a bit of a workout. And they said, no, you can't go because the princess is busy and you'll have to wait for her to leave. And I thought they were making a joke. And they were like, no, the princess of Rajasthan is in there at the moment, so you can't use it. And that was the first, being told I can't because of the princess. So and that was the level. As we arrived and drove in, I think there must have been 15 staff members. There's this massive stairway. Each stair had a person standing there greeting us, and it's just the culture. It's incredible.
But a land of contrasts as well. You mentioned that literally, that dividing wall, the space of a meter, takes you from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich.
The guests we drove past, we drove under a railway bridge, and as you drive underneath it, I'm used to seeing. South Africa it's no secret. There's a great divide here, and there's a lot of poverty. But it's nothing compared to what I got to see, the little bit that I got to see in India. We didn't go into any of the really affected areas. And again, from India, it's no offense to India. Like I said, I grew up with the same in South Africa. But it is interesting and very eye-opening to see the difference, and especially to the palace. You'll drive past people in severe poverty, kids, and literally turn into the palace gates and into the property. And but again, it's something that you knew, but to see it firsthand it's eye-opening, eh?
So you guys were there for 2 nights.
Yeah.
Incredible food, incredible accommodation.
Yeah.
Ready then for another safari experience.
Yes.
Back into the wilds to a relative degree. Tawai is an area which is not quite as preserved as Ranthambore. You've got people living at the base of these rocky outcrops.
Yeah.
Essentially living amongst leopards, or leopards living amongst them. I think it's more that people live amongst the leopards there, from what I've gathered around the respect that they have for these animals. Just tell us a bit about that area.
So Jawai is interesting. It is both you and I and Jerry and Jono. We first came to know the place about three or 4 years ago, and ever since then, it was just this dream destination. And because it's so completely unique, there is literally, and I try to think of it, apart from the area where you headed, is it this year, to the Moru Koppies?
Yeah.
So Koppies of the Serengeti. Like, apart from that, but not even that, you can't find the scale of rocks and boulders and a leopard anywhere else in the world that I can think of. And it's mind-boggling. And driving in there, you can kind of see, driving from Jaipur, getting wilder and wilder, and you turn off a little, onto a little kind of more potholes than gravel little road, then through a little village, and then you start seeing the first granite outcrop. And then my heart just started thumping, because you immediately recognize that, this is Hawaii. And you just keep driving through villages, and then we met with our guides, excellent guides, drove another 15 minutes to camp, and even then you're driving past cattle, greeted a herdsman, and then you arrived at camp. And it never felt like, hey, we're now in the wilds, here's your safari camp. It just, as we stop, you can hear music, you can hear a goat going in the background, and it's just a surreal experience. And then you start your safari, and the guys are like, no, we had a leopard in this area in the morning, and we're just going to go follow up. And so we're driving, and then it's, you're still in the villages. And I knew it was going to be like that, but to actually, and then you hear peacock alarming, which, to see peacocks, I mean, I see them at hotels in Johannesburg, and here you have a peacock in the wild that won't pose for a photograph because they run away every time you stop, and it's, why are you supposed to be tame, So even that's mind-blowing. And then you hear this peacock alarming, and you have to drive through kids to look for the leopard, running around, waving, and cattle coming past, always looking for a leopard. And it sounds like it might be a negative thing, but it was one of the best experiences I've ever had, because it's so natural.
I was going to say, we often talk about people and Africa specifically. What was it like? And we try and remove people from these environments. So, is it natural to go to the Masai Mara and see the migratory herds and not see Masai people?
Yeah.
Or was the natural state of affairs with the people integrated in the wildlife? And so that this region reminds me of that. It's people having a healthy respect for wildlife, and you were mentioning that the main prey species are dogs and cattle and peacocks, and that yet these people have this healthy respect for them, and the leopard population here is thriving. I mean, it's for me, that's the kind of thing that is really exciting, and where people have placed a value on wildlife, and now tourism is coming into this. And again, this is another Relais Chateau property, so this is top-end experiences within an area where it's not just preserved for wildlife and this is just for us to enjoy. This is actual people living. They've got agricultural practices around there, yet they're living in harmony with wildlife.
Exactly. It's crazy, Andrew, I promise you. And one of the things about it is that one safari that's similar is the Serengeti, where you drive from Arusha through into the Serengeti, and you drive through Maasai pastoral lands, and you can see Maasai, and slowly but surely you start seeing zebra in between the cows, and then it becomes wilder and wilder. And it's beautiful to see it that way. And this is similar, but just far more intense, because in this area you get leopard, and around Sherbak, they've intense studies, just to let you know. So what Sujan have done very well is they do study them, and they try and gather as much intel. Even when the camp closes during the monsoon and the heavy rains, guys stay in camp and they keep monitoring them, they keep studying them, and you can see they're doing well. Just the number of cubs we had a female with 2 cubs, there was a female with 3 cubs, and there was 2 females mating with the males. I mean, the population will definitely grow, and at this stage they're seeing 22, or have identified 22 individuals around camp, of which they see about 12 or 13 on a regular basis. So, and that's just around the camp itself. I think, like, if you compare it to anything else, I think the only thing that comes close would be Luangwa and the Sands, and I think this is even more intense. And
So
it's
go for it.
no.
So a typical drive, you head out through the town, through the village, dodging and weaving through people and kids and goats, up onto these granite koppies, and you're essentially scanning around to try and find leopards in. I mean, some of the scenery as you guys driving up in these vehicles and scanning across, you can see it. And you were showing me a video where you drive up to one koppie and you literally are looking behind houses onto the next koppie to try and see if you can spot them.
That's it. And that's what makes it so unique. And again, it doesn't feel like it's a negative thing, because you understand how how these leopards are preserved and how they're considered sacred, and almost like a deity, or they really are protected. So even though the leopard, they prey on goats, the main prey species, or any kind of prey species, there would be goats, dogs, peacock, nilgai, which is the largest antelope species in the area. They would catch jackals, langur monkeys, which are more difficult, but basically the main prey would be goats and dogs, and there are a lot of both. But even if they catch a goat, the government does compensate for that, so they'll give the herder an amount of cash, but the guys, they don't retaliate, they don't go and kill the leopard or track the leopard down. It's just a way of life. And I think the last person affected or attacked by a leopard, according to our guide, was 166 years ago.
Good grief.
So I mean, that's living in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
The leopards have adapted their way of life. They're not out during the day. They stay in rocky crevices and caves during the daytime, so that gives them time to avoid people. People avoid them, and the guys will see them. And we'll be in a sighting, looking at this leopard, and people will walk past, look at the leopard, look at us, and just carry on to their bunch of sticks or their goats. Amazing. And off they go. And it's just a way of life. It's amazing. So and something else to add that's interesting, and I think that population is going to keep moving, is there's no predators for these cubs. So if a female has 3 cubs, the odds of one of those cubs, the only danger would be another male leopard.
Sure.
And that's another thing. If you look at other places like the Sands and Luangwa, this is a very interesting fact, because leopard mortality is so high in cubs, and here the cubs are thriving. So next year you're talking about probably another 8 or 9 cats being added to that population through cubs surviving. That's incredible.
And that's probably led to them being far more social. I know you've got footage
Yes.
of a male and female mating with another female in attendance, which is almost unheard of. And it's just so, their whole dynamics seem to have changed a little.
Exactly.
So this was obviously your first trip into India. No matter how much research and no matter how many people we call on when we do these first trips, there's always going to be something that we're going to change in an experience to try and better it and move forward. What's going to be changing in the itinerary in 2019?
So this was a great experience. All the guests loved it. You guys will see some of the guest images and the experiences on it as well. But like you said, with anything, we always try and make it better. And even existing trips, we try and add
always.
or like it's there's no point in keeping things the same if you can improve whatever we're putting out there. And so we'll do the same next year. I'm going to flip it around. So we'll start. With tigers.
Okay.
So the safari will probably kick off in Jaipur, because there's direct flights from Dubai, which is pretty interesting. So you can fly direct from Dubai into Jaipur, spend a night there, and then go straight from there to Hawaii. As I mentioned, about a 5 or 6 hour drive. Again, 4 nights at Hawaii, which is a great time. You don't need too much more than that, and you'll have a wonderful experience there. And then we'll probably fly. So we'll take a chartered flight from there to Sheba.
Okay.
And that'll probably be 6 nights. So a little bit of a longer time in Ranthambore. It's also going to be a different season. January is really cold, and there was great tiger activity. This time we're going to go when it's very hot in April. And what happens is, it's not that one is necessarily better than the others. I think wintertime cats are a little bit more active. So if you find them, you probably spend a bit more time with them running and playing, which we did see a lot of this time around. April, there's less water. Tigers love water. They love lying in the water. They love swimming. And there's better chances of them actually populating the lakes and remaining waterholes. And so the focus of April will be more tigers coming out to these remaining waterholes and hunting around the waterholes. So that'll be 6 nights. And the safari will end with the night in Jaipur again at the palace, at the Raj Mahal Palace. It might sound, for those of you thinking like the palace and the luxury is over the top, it's not. This palace it's not a manufactured hotel. It's an historical palace. Like you walk in there and it's this real, authentic experience. And the same with the other camps. They relay in chateau, but you don't want to be slumming it. There's some really, I mean, there are other ways to do it. But I think the way that we've done the safari, we're going to continue our partnership with Sujan, and those properties are just unbelievable. And so in for a special time next year.
I think, we offer a number of bucket lists, destinations and trips. And those are the kind of trips that, for a lot of people, it's something they'll do once.
Yeah.
And they'll do it once properly.
Yes.
And leave satisfied that they've experienced it and that it's been ticked off, that they haven't left something else to go back to. And I think that's pretty much what this trip does. Is if this was something that you guys have always wanted to do, this would be the itinerary to do it. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And we're given even offer bolt-on options to go see the Taj Mahal, and there's a couple of options to go do before and after. So it's going to be exciting, but and definitely, like you said, bucket list, and the kind of place that once you go, you want to go back, because it is something else. It's very unique.
Wrapping it up, two moments that really stood out for you from the safari.
Seeing a tiger for the first time. So the actual first sighting was 3 cubs playing in front of the car, believe it or not. That was
not a bad way to start, Marlon.
But the official first time, I was the only one who saw it. We heard alarm calls. We spent about an hour looking down a riverbed, and about 200 meters away there was a small window, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters window, that you could see a bit more of the woodland behind that. And I heard the alarm calls, and I promise you, I was fixed with my binoculars like this. My eyes started hurting, and all I saw were the stripes moving through that window.
Right.
And that was you can ask my guess. I was like, tiger, like where? I was like, you're not gonna see it, but I saw it, and I was just very excited. So that was my first, literally that, and that's almost the way I wanted it to be, those stripes, because that's the way you imagine it to be in.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one, seeing it for the first time. And I think just being in India, it was a surreal feeling, landing there, the smells, the food, the culture. It wasn't one specific experience, but it's just the India as a country is incredible. And then seeing a tiger in the wild for the very first time, it's hard to beat that. It's very hard to beat.
Awesome. Well, guys, Marlon's Trip Report is live on the blog, so check it out and find out a little bit more about this year's trip and what's coming in the future.
Thanks guys. Thank you. Awesome.